Welcome to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. Think about it. Our view of God determines what we think on all moral, cultural, and economic issues. It even determines how we vote. Hope for the future of our country and our world lies in our ability to make God the issue in every issue. Today we're talking about critical race theory, or CRT. Boy, hang on for this conversation. Brad Bright, thanks for being with us today.
Great to be here. This is going to be a fun show. This is another one of those shows where angels fear to tread.
But you're not fearful to tread there. Okay, so
Well, maybe I'm just too dumb, and I don't know.
what is that saying about you? I'm not sure what it's saying about you. Okay, all right, listen, Brad. Critical race theory and the whole woke movement has generated a lot of controversy over the past few years, both inside and outside the church. I mean, really everywhere. It's pitted parents against school districts. It's caused heated debate inside even the Southern Baptist Convention, the hallowed halls. In fact, it's polarizing the entire body of Christ in the United States. Some churches are going woke, while others run to the hills. What is going on?
Well, actually, before we go there, before I answer that question, let me just give a brief overview of what we're doing today. First, we're going to talk about CRT so that our listeners will have a better understanding of what CRT really is. But then, and this is the part I'm excited about, we're going to go to giving people questions they can use to be able to talk about critical race theory in order to make God the issue. So it's a productive conversation. And that's what we'll close with. We'll close the show with those questions. So, but let me respond to your question then, Jim. You know, every follower of Jesus knows that we wronged our Black brothers and our Black sisters. Now, we've made great progress. We've abolished slavery. We've abolished the Jim Crow laws. We got rid of the KKK. Well, we marginalized it so that it doesn't have any real impact in culture anymore. We've outlawed overt discrimination throughout our culture. However, there is still a lot of work to do. And in the midst of all this, you know, the church is not really led on this issue. Now, there have been some areas where the church has made progress, but we have not led. And it's really been for the last 100 years. So within that context, along comes this ideology called CRT, called critical race theory. It identifies what it deems to be the core problem, and then it offers a solution to that problem. Now, as a result, a lot of our people, a lot of Christians have jumped on the CRT bandwagon because they deeply care about those who hurt, as they should, as we should. However, the problem is, although their compassion is admirable, it's not been guided by wisdom and knowledge.
So are you saying that followers of Jesus who embrace CRT are unwise?
Well, let me answer your question this way. What CRT got right is that systemic racism exists. What it got wrong is the belief that systemic racism is the cause rather than the symptom. It puts the cart before the horse. That's the fundamental problem with the entire woke movement. That mistake is due to one fundamental flawed assumption that no true follower of Jesus can even embrace.
What assumption are you talking about?
Well, that God doesn't exist. That's the fundamental assumption behind CRT.
I think you need to unpack that a little bit, Brad.
Well, okay. Yeah, let me just start at the beginning. Okay. If God doesn't exist, sin doesn't exist, right? If God doesn't exist, sin can't exist.
Wait a minute, why is that? Why is that?
Because sin is simply the absence of good. God is good. God created us. God said we fell, and our falling away from him is what is called sin. And with the fall with Adam, we fell, and as a result, every human being born since Adam has had a sin nature. Okay. That is a proclivity to rebel against God.
Okay.
That is really all it is.
All right. So going back, you said if God doesn't exist, then sin doesn't exist.
Then sin doesn't exist because sin is rebellion against God, rebellion against what God wants us to do. And if sin doesn't exist, then we can't actually have a sin nature. Can't exist. And if we don't have a sin nature, then we must be born basically good. We're good. We're morally neutral. We're morally good. So that means that evil doesn't come from inside. Evil must come from outside. It must happen to us. Something outside of us must cause us to be evil, right? That pretty clear?
Oh, no, not really. So I'm thinking our listeners might be a little bit confused, like I'm confused. But you're saying if God doesn't exist, then sin doesn't exist. And if
And the
sin
sin
doesn't
doesn't
exist,
exist, no sin
then
nature.
right, there's no sin nature. So basically, we're good people. So if sin happens or if bad things happen, then it's not because we're bad people. It's because somebody else is making us do it.
Yeah, if we become evil, if we become bad people, it's because something outside of us caused us to go bad.
All right.
Nothing, wasn't anything internal. That's
All
the
right.
assumption.
So if CRT, critical race theory, denies the existence of God, sin, and a sin nature, what does CRT say is the cause of racism?
Okay,
Racism.
that's a good question. Critical theory, of which critical race theory is a subset, critical theory says that oppression is the cause, not sin. Oppression is the cause of racism and every other evil in society. Oppression, by definition, is external, not internal. Therefore, racism arises from an external system rather than from inside the individual. Therefore, CRT says that racist systems, structures, environments are the cause of racism and need to be torn down.
That doesn't appear to be what the Bible teaches. I've read my Bible 35 or 36 times. The Bible's pretty clear that sin is the problem and that it's not even debatable if you take Jesus seriously.
Yeah, Jesus was very clear, like in Matthew 15, 19. He said, out of the heart come what? Evil thoughts. Out of the heart, out of the nature of mankind come evil thoughts. So if racism starts in the heart rather than the system, then CRT is doomed because it has it backwards. It reverses cause and effect. It substitutes the symptom for the problem. It tries to cure the disease by suppressing the symptoms. It's like assuming that sonic booms cause jets to fly at supersonic speed, or assuming that the sun revolves around the earth, or that survival of the fittest mandates that somehow we must be kind. See, if your primary assumption is wrong, everything you build on that assumption is going to be wrong as well.
Well, I can't wait to unpack this a little bit more. I got to be honest, I'm a little, I know I don't agree with critical race theory, but your approach to it is making my mind melt a little bit. So when we get back in the second segment, hope we get to bring my mind back to a normal status, which is just barely beyond melting anyway. We're talking with Brad Bright today about critical race theory. What should be our thoughts on critical race theory? And how do we make God the issue in this issue? You're listening to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright, and we'll be right back.
Want to know more about how you can make God the issue in every issue? Get your copy of Brad's book, God is the Issue. Now in its third edition, you can get your ebook copy at brightmedia.org. Even better, if you subscribe to this podcast, you'll receive a coupon for one free download of God is the Issue ebook. Go to brightmedia.org, that's brightmedia.org, and get God is the Issue ebook today.
Welcome back to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright, as we're talking today about critical race theory. All right. So, Brad, if critical race theory says that oppression is the problem, oppression is the cause of all the evils in the world, do I have that right?
It's the cause, but you've got to be a little careful there, because just because it's the cause, there's a disconnect here. CRT doesn't say that therefore the solution is to get rid of oppression. And this is the critical that you understand. Oppression is the problem, but the solution is not to get rid of oppression. The solution is to get rid of the oppressor.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So critical race theory doesn't say get rid of oppression. It just shifts the oppression to oppressing the former oppressor?
Well, in effect, because the goal of CRT is to dethrone the oppressors, right? And the way to do that is through power. The oppressor is supposed to rise up and take away power from the oppressor. Yeah, but so here's the question. Now, who has power? In the real world where sin nature actually exists, once the oppressed take power, what's going to happen?
Well, they become the oppressor.
Exactly. They become the oppressor. Now you just have a new oppressor. I mean, think the French Revolution, think Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot, Maduro. The oppressed become the new oppressors. That's exactly right. And the cycle starts all over. Our sinful nature almost guarantees it because CRT misunderstands the basic nature of mankind. And because of that, it can't eradicate oppression. All it can do is replace one set of oppressors with another set in a never ending struggle for power. CRT has no understanding, no room for reconciliation or forgiveness, only oppression and power. And I think Jesus made his position on the CRT perfectly clear when he said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
So you're saying critical race theory thinks there's no God, no sin nature. Oppression is the cause of all evil. So because we're being oppressed, we're doing evil things. But the solution is not to get rid of oppression, just the oppressors. And that Jesus was wrong when he said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Did I get all this right about critical race theory?
Yeah, you got it right. And here's the thing. Don't believe me. Believe Ibram X. Kendi. Ibram X. Kendi wrote the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And he's acknowledged as one of the primary leaders of the woke movement today. So, and here's the thing, his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is in almost every public school in America today, across the country. But here's what he said, and let me quote. He said, the remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination, unquote. Did you get that? The remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. In other words, discriminate against those who discriminated against you. Do unto others as they have done unto you. Apparently, he somehow thinks two wrongs make a right. I don't get it.
Do you think this Ibram X. Kendi was just trying to be practical, or do you think he's advocating payback?
I don't know Kendi's heart. Don't know Kendi, don't know his heart. His motives may be pure as the driven snow. I honestly don't know. But his mechanism is strictly punitive. It's an eye for an eye. And one thing is crystal clear. Kendi disagrees with Jesus. He thinks Jesus got this one wrong. Yeah. Kendi and the entire woke movement says the solution to racial discrimination is more racial discrimination. Specifically, the best way to end discrimination against blacks is to discriminate against whites. That's what Kendi unashamedly advocates. Now, here's the thing. That's starting to be implemented around the country. Recently, the Minneapolis school system implemented a policy of laying off people based on the color of their skin. That, of course, means whites. Their stated justification was to make up for past discrimination. Where have we heard that before? That came straight from Kendi. Randy Weingarten, who's the president of the American Teachers Association, she has now come out and endorsed the policy. So don't think that Kendi's words aren't having a real impact in culture. But here's the critical question that we all have to answer as believers. Do we agree with Kendi or do we agree with Jesus? Do we believe Jesus's words, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or with Kendi's, it's really summarized by do unto others as they have done unto you? That's the choice.
It's retribution never really ends very well. Okay, so I agree with Jesus, of course. But anyone presented with the real facts, I think would also agree with the facts the way that you just stated them. And if they actually read Kendi's words, I think it's ridiculous to think that racism is the solution to racism. But it seems like our culture is leaning that way.
Well, we are leaning that way. And think of it, if God doesn't exist, it's probably the best option available. It's man's solution to a sin problem. And rarely does man's solution to a sin problem work very well. Here's the point. No matter what his intent is, if we go with Kendi, the inevitable result is the Hatfields and the McCoys on a culture-wide level. The animosity will never go away because someone will always feel hurt or slighted or wrong. It'll lead to a never-ending cycle of retribution where each side cries out for justice. And of course, what each side means is justice for me, right? So we can do that, or we can go with Jesus's words. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, that means we each do our part to build constructive relationships across the racial divide, leading to a society that really values character over race. So, you can follow Kendi or you can follow Jesus. It's your choice. One path leads to anger and retribution, the other to reconciliation.
This is a tough conversation. Brad, the title of this podcast is God is the Issue. And when we come back from our break, I want to see you make God the issue in this issue, and how we as Christ followers can turn this rhetoric right side up. Because this CRT seems like it's heading in a whole wrong different direction. You're listening to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We got some answers for you. Hang on.
Brad Bright travels the country speaking and training people how to make God the issue in every issue. Go to brightmedia.org, that's brightmedia.org, to find out how you can bring Brad's highly interactive workshop to your area. It's fun, engaging, and most important, it will help make you more effective in making God the issue in every issue. Go to brightmedia.org, that's brightmedia.org, and schedule Brad today.
Welcome back to the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. We're talking about critical race theory today, and how do we make God the issue in this issue? Brad, this is a frustrating conversation because you've stated that critical race theory is based on the theory that the solution to racism is racism, and that the solution is taking the oppressed and making them the new oppressors. And as Kendi said, that the solution to past discrimination is present discrimination. The solution to present discrimination is future discrimination. And it's just ridiculous. That's just a cycle that's got to end. So how do you think is the best way for the average Christ follower to respond to critical race theory and this whole social justice warriors movement when it comes up in a conversation about CRT?
Well, I think you keep it very simple, and you don't get argumentative, but keep it simple and really ask three questions. And the first is, begin by saying, Jesus said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." How do you think that impacts the way whites should treat blacks? Now, then the average social justice warrior, they're probably going to wax eloquent on that. Well, this and this and this and this and this and this, and let them talk. Listen to them. Let them talk, because they're probably going to have a lot of ideas. But then ask the second question. How do you think that impacts the way blacks should treat whites? Now then, they might squirm a little bit. They might get defensive. They might redirect the conversation. They might get angry. That's okay. Just listen. But then end with this question. If we all tried to live out Jesus's words, what do you think society would look like? Do you think it'd be a better place or a worse place? And then just be quiet.
This would be a tough conversation. There's no question. Because from my perspective, it seems like the answer is obvious. How am I supposed to keep my cool?
Look, you just have to understand that your job is not to convince people of the truth. Your job is to lead them toward the truth. They'll choose to believe it or not. And a great way to lead people toward the truth is to ask them questions, but ask them questions that really get them to think about it from God's perspective, from Jesus's perspective, not you. Keep yourself out of it. You're not the authority here. I'm not the authority. God is the authority. The goal is to get them to have a conversation really with Jesus. Here's the reality, Jim. They probably don't value what I think or what you think anyway. So why are we going to try to convince them that they're right? They don't value what they think. But Jesus, that's another question. Even if they disagree with Jesus, they understand Jesus was a pivotal figure in history.
What do you think that conversation would sound like?
Well, first of all, yeah. Again, let me reemphasize. Don't react. Don't get defensive.
Don't react. Okay. All right.
Don't do it. I mean, once you do it, the conversation is going to devolve. In fact, where they make good arguments, compliment them. Look for things you can compliment them on and say, I think that's a good point. I mean, acknowledge when they have a legitimate point, because there are some legitimate grievances, some legitimate points. No matter how small, try to find something that you agree with them on. What that conveys is that you're actually listening to them and that you respect them. But then here again, get them to debate with Jesus, not with you. I mean, frame it this way. Look, frame it this way. If you want to change my mind, you need to convince me that Jesus was wrong when he said, Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Can you convince me of that? You see, Jim, we've got to make God the issue. It's not about what I think and believe. It's about what God believes.
Brad Bright on critical race theory. Phenomenal conversation. Very challenging. Feeling very challenged at this point in time. Brad, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
And thanks for joining us today on the God is the Issue podcast with Brad Bright. Remember to check us out online at brightmedia.org, brightmedia.org. And remember, especially during your conversations about critical race theory, always be kind, compassionate, listen, and be shrewd while making God the issue in every issue.